So as we enter into this new sermon series, we're looking through the Psalms. We're going to be looking at different Psalms, and as we look into them, it brings into our heart a different kind of prayer. A prayer that maybe we haven't said, a prayer that may not be our focus, a prayer that we know but may not be part of our practice, our everyday life. And this first prayer, this first look into Psalm is Psalm 32. But before we get into Psalm 32, I have a question. And I know school is 3 weeks away, and some of our students are like, oh, school again. Oh no, it's coming up quickly. But to get into that mindset, and those of us who haven't been in school for quite some time, here comes a word that may cause shivers down our neck. What is an exam? What's an exam? A test. A test of what? A test of knowledge, a test of understanding, a test that we have this information that's been given to us, and it's a look and seeing what that means. Well, in our spiritual life, there's another word. It's called examine, and it's spelled very similar. It's E-X-A-M-E-N. And it's a word that causes us to reflect. It's a reflection. It's an examination of our heart, of our lives. There's two different things of examine. There's an examine of consciousness, which is God working in my life. That reflection of how God has moved through my day. Where looking at my thoughts, my feelings, my actions, and where was God moving in this time. And there's another examine. It's an examine of conscious. It's an in-depth look at our heart. It's that reflection and that look at what's going on within me. It's that prayer that, excuse me, a prayer that says, comes out of Psalm 139 that says, Lord, you know my rising and my sitting, my coming and my going. You know the words that are on my tongue before I say them. There's another psalm where it says, Lord, examine me, search me and try me. And those are prayers of that examine, that prayers of looking deep within. I got two quotes here. The first one is from Socrates, or some have said Plato. It's an early Greek philosopher. And it says, the examine life is the only life worth living. And I thought about that for a minute because we, in our day, in our age, we have so many things that are going on, so many things that pull our attention away from examining our life that we kind of forget about it. I mean, which is easier? Which is easier, to examine my life or to pull up Facebook? Which is easier, to examine my life and look at what's going on inside of me, or to text somebody, or to tweet out what happened, for what's going on, or to Snapchat my lunch or something along those. And I don't use tweet or Snapchat or Instagram, so those are just things that I see other people doing. Just so you know, if you're going to ask me about it later, I'll deny everything. But then comes this quote from Cornel West, that it takes more courage to examine the dark corners of your own soul than it does for a soldier to fight on the battlefield. And I thought Dr. West did a great job, did a great job in bringing forward the strength it takes to examine our heart, to allow God to work within us, to let God's Spirit come in and begin to point out those things that we need to confess, those things that we need to say, God, this was wrong. And as we jump into Psalm 32 and look at our scripture today, if you would join me in reading, you'll hear that in this psalm. So you join me. It's in your worship folder, also on the screen behind me. Blessed is the one whose transgressions are forgiven, whose sins are covered. Blessed is the one whose sin the Lord does not count against them, and in whose spirit is no deceit. When I kept silent, My bones wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy on me. My strength was sapped as in the heat of summer. Then I acknowledged my sin to you and did not cover my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. Therefore, let all the faithful pray to you while you may be found. Surely the rising of the mighty waters will not reach them. You are my hiding place. You will protect me from trouble and surround me with songs of deliverance. As a life, it's a psalm that David has either written or is written for him. But it's that psalm that begins to look at a life. And as we look through their scripture, there's probably a couple of troubling words that we're not using today, but words that can speak into our life. And so I just wanted to share a couple of those troubling words that we may need to define. Blessed. We kind of use that word in church circles, but do we get to the deep meaning of that? Blessed is a happy estate, a happy way of being. Blessed is the one whose transgressions are forgiven, whose sins are covered, says verse 1. Happy are those who are forgiven. Happy are those whose sin is no longer held against them. Happy are those who can walk in life and know that they are free. Transgression is that rebellion against God. That transgression is in this text is just a little different than sin, a little different than iniquity. Iniquity is further on, and I forgot to put that on my slide. But transgression is that rebellion, that God has said something and we say no. You know, being those typical teenagers that we still are, even if we are maybe 70 years beyond being a teenager, we still have those tendencies to do my own way. Maybe it's not even a teenager, maybe it's just being an adult 2-year-old, doing what we want to do. As adults, we suffer through the consequences of those actions, but still that transgression is saying, I'm not doing that. That sin is that offense against God or turning away from God's will. But we know what God has said to us, or we know where God's directing us, and we say, I'm going to go this direction, not that direction. Iniquity is a little harsher. Iniquity was more of a crime, a criminal that things were working against. And as these words kind of swirl around and we kind of dig into them, maybe a different reading, and this comes from the Message, and hear these words. Count yourself lucky. How happy you must be, you get a fresh start. Your slate's wiped clean. Count yourself lucky. God holds nothing against you, and you're holding nothing back from him. When I kept it all inside, my bones turned to powder. My words became day-long groans. The pressure never let up, and all the juices of my life dried up. Then I let it all out. I said, I'll make a clean breast of my failures to God. Suddenly the pressure was gone. My guilt dissolved, my sin disappeared. These things added up. Every one of us needs to pray. When all hell breaks loose and the dam bursts, we'll be on high ground, untouched. God's my island hideaway, keeps dangers far from the shore, throws garlands of hosannas around my neck. Eugene Peterson is writing the words from Psalm 32, and he shares them in a different language, in a different way that maybe it's easier to understand, but it still has some of the same meaning. That same meaning that as I walk through my day, as I walk through my life, and I begin to look at what God is doing, there's something within me that I try to hide stuff. I try to hide from God what I've done wrong because it comes back to how we see a community of believers. It's how we see the community of people gathering around the cross. how we look at each other. Do we see each other as a community of saints? Or do we see this community as a community of sinners? Because it's very important that we kind of define what this looks like. Because if we see each other as a community of saints, then we're going to hide our sin. We're going to hide because we think everyone else doesn't understand. We think everyone else doesn't know. We think everyone else is holier than me. And I'm the only one who sins. I'm the only one. And there's this loneliness that props up, this loneliness that gathers into our heart, this loneliness that begins to eat away at our bones. Because we need to hide it. We need to put that false wall up. And if we're doing it to each other, then we're going to do it to God. Oh, God won't love me if he sees that I've done wrong. I'm supposed to be forgiven and I'm supposed to be this saved person, but I still hold on to this sin. I still hold on to this piece of my life that God has said don't do. So if I ignore it, if I don't confess it, if I get busy doing other things, then it won't matter. That it won't come up. That it won't be a part of my day or my life. And verse 3 comes really into play. That my bones waste away. As Eugene Peterson said, that my bones dry up and my groans are all day long. Because we got to keep it a secret. If people would only know, they wouldn't like me. If people would only see what's going on, because they are perfect. Or so that's how they portray themselves, or that's how my perception of them is. Because it's a community of saints. But if we see ourselves and we see other people as a community of sinners, that changes things. If we see each other as a community of sinners, then all of a sudden you are struggling with what I am struggling. We're struggling together with this. We're struggling with the same things. We're struggling that we're not perfect. We're struggling with this rebellion that's rising up within us. We're struggling with these offenses that we've done to God and to others. And we can speak about them. Because you're no different than I am. There's a community then that comes together, a community that is in need of sharing what's going on, a community that says that the struggles I have are not my own. The struggles that I have, other people share. And all of a sudden we begin to feel free. Free to share. Free to say, you know what, I've been looking deep within my heart and this is what I find. And the person sitting across the table, they see the same things in them and themselves. Not, maybe they see it in us too, but they also see it within them. They can say, you know what, I have that same issue. I have spoken this to somebody else. I've said some harsh words. I'm using language that I normally don't, and these words just keep coming out, and they've been building up, and all of a sudden I explode. And the person across the table says, you know what, I explode too. But I may not use words, I may throw things. I may have to remove myself so I can yell. Maybe parents can identify with this. You don't have to raise your hands. Although this is a community of sinners, maybe we should, but that's okay. How many of us have yelled at our children when they didn't do anything wrong? But we were so angry and frustrated that it just came out. How many of us have yelled at our children? And felt bad about it afterwards? We confess. We say, you know what, that resonates with me. But we don't speak about it. We don't talk about it. I haven't heard that from any other parents yet. Maybe I will afterwards. We'll see. But it's that moment within us that when we see other people just like us, struggling with the same struggles, looking deep within their own hearts and seeing the same things, we've done that examine. And we begin to confess, because that's what the psalmist says next. He says, then I acknowledge my sin to you. I did not cover up my iniquity. I did not cover up my transgression. I did not cover up my sin. I let it come out. And you forgave me. You covered them. You covered them. I said, I will confess my transgressions, and you forgave the guilt. And isn't that like the community of sinners? We receive this forgiveness from God. And as we see each other as this community, we begin to share that forgiveness with others. We begin to say, you know what? I've been forgiven. God will forgive you as well. If we see each other as someone higher, stronger, encouraged more, or spiritually mature, we don't share those words because we think they already have them. We think they already say them. We think that it's part of their everyday life. Maybe it is. But I'm willing to bet it isn't. That they need to hear those same words that you do. You are forgiven. And see that Jesus has forgiven them just as he has forgiven me. And there's something about saying it and hearing it. I remember this time at camp, and I've done this a couple different times, where we'd gather the kids around and we'd talk about forgiveness, and we would have them write down that sin, whatever it is. And I believe you've done it here as well. But as they wrote it down, it was put into, actually what we did is we just threw it into the fire. It's forgiven. It's no longer held against you. And maybe you brought it forward and laid it on the altar, and and it was burned up as well. But it was that moment for them that was freeing. It was a moment for them that they physically saw that they were forgiven. And they saw each other because no one had a blank piece of paper. Everyone had something written on it. Because we all have a sin. We all have a transgression. We all have iniquity. We all have something we've done against God. And in that moment, we're willing to admit it. Just like in this moment now, as you're processing this, there's this part in as we come into communion, there's going to be this part where we say that we have sinned. And we hear the words of assurance, in the name of Jesus Christ, you are forgiven. And in this same moment, that examine of our conscience begins. Because we start by saying, God, search me and try me. Show me what I need to ask for forgiveness of. There's another image we have of these times where we don't confess, and it's the image of a dam. And you think about the pressure of the water on that wall. That pressure, if it rains, continues to rain, it builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. And this, and this comes out of verse 6. That this pressure continues to build up. And the words, the unconfessed part of our lives begins to put more and more water. And then comes this moment of confession. And the waters come out. The pressure is released. And we don't see it anymore. It's like when we keep that secret. That secret is the part of us we don't want other people to see. It's that water behind the dam. And then as soon as we release that secret, as soon as we tell the truth, as soon as we seek that forgiveness, all of a sudden the waters come forward. And we feel that release. We feel that tension running out of our bodies. We feel that tension running out of our soul. In verses... part of your reading for the foundation was Psalm 32, verse 9. And it says these words, "Do not be like a horse or a mule without understanding, whose temper must be curbed with bit and bridle, else it will not stay near." And the idea of what the psalmist is saying is, do not be like the horse or the mule. I mean, first of all, we're people, so we're not horse and mule unless you're a centaur, but that's a whole different conversation for another day. But we have this understanding where the horse and the mule need to have the bridle or need to have the lead rope to be guided around. Because they're animals that sometimes want to go their own direction. And if you think about that for a moment, we're people that want to go our own direction. And the psalmist is saying, don't be like that. Don't have to be drug around. Let this confession, let this life of examination come out of you, so that as you confess and as you release those sins and you are able to be, that you are forgiven, that you're able to walk in God's will and walk in God's way without having to be drugged, without having to be forced to, because it's a part of your life. It's a part of your day. It's a part of your heart. So in this moment, we want to ask two things. Who should we confess to? And I think there's two options, and both are very valid and both are very healthy. One is to Jesus. I mean, that's kind of almost like the Sunday school answer or the Christian answer. Well, who do I confess to? I confess my sins to God, to Jesus. That's first. But there are times in our life when we need to confess to other people. Maybe your parents told you this. Go tell your brother or your sister that you're sorry. Well, what are you sorry about? And you confessed. I'm sorry for hitting you. I'm sorry for taking your toy. I'm sorry for taking your allowance. I'm sorry for lying. I'm sorry for tricking you. That was just yesterday. We have these moments where we're sorry. And we need to speak it to other people. Because we see them as the same people that are just like us, who are going down the same road. And we're in this community, a faith community, a community that are sinners, looking for forgiveness. And we're able to share that. And we're able to live that life out. But it takes a life that says that there are no secrets. It takes a life that says, God, I need you to walk with me through my heart. And dig deep. And take the time to do so. Again, Dr. Cornel West's quote, "It takes more courage to examine the dark corners of our own soul than it does for a soldier to fight on the battlefield." Will you take the time this week